The phone was ringing when I walked into my office that Friday morning, and something about the sound made my skin crawl. After 20 years running Parish Electric with my brother John, you develop an instinct for trouble calls. This one felt different, personal, like a funeral bell with my name on it. "James Parish," I answered, already reaching for my coffee. "Jim, thank God." Beth's voice was shaking, which was weird because my wife hadn't shown genuine emotion since our wedding day 15 years ago. "You need to come home, right now. It's an emergency." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I glanced at my schedule. 3 job sites to visit, 2 contractor meetings, and a stack of permits that wouldn't approve themselves. "What kind of emergency? Did one of the girls get hurt?" "Just come home. Please." The line went ended. I stared at the phone, that crawling sensation spreading up my neck. Beth didn't say, "Please," ever. She commanded, manipulated, guilt-tripped, but she never begged. Mary, my assistant, poked her head through the door. "Everything okay, boss?" "Family emergency. Cancel my morning appointments." I grabbed my keys and headed for the parking lot, my mind racing through possibilities. Beau was 15, old enough to get into real trouble. Bree was 13, still my baby, but growing up fast in ways that terrified me. Maybe one of them had been in an accident or gotten arrested, or... I forced myself to slow down as I pulled into our subdivision. Panicking wouldn't help anyone, and Beth had a talent for turning minor inconveniences into life-or-death crises. Last month's emergency had been a spider in the bathroom. The month before, a mysterious noise in the attic that turned out to be squirrels. But there were no squirrels in my driveway. Instead, there was a moving truck. 2 guys in coveralls were loading our dining room table into the back of a U-Haul while Beth stood on the front porch, arms crossed, wearing the same expression she got when returning defective merchandise. Cold, businesslike, final. I parked behind the truck and walked toward the house in a daze. The movers nodded at me politely, like this was just another Tuesday for them. Maybe it was. "Beth?" My voice came out smaller than I intended. "What's going on?" She handed me a manila envelope without making eye contact. "I'm leaving, Jim. We're getting divorced." The words hit me like a live wire. I fumbled with the envelope, my electrician's hands suddenly clumsy and useless. Inside were legal documents, official stamps, my name typed in cold black letters next to phrases like irreconcilable differences and division of assets. "Where are the girls?" "They're with me. We're staying somewhere else now." "Somewhere else?" I looked around our front yard, noting which furniture was disappearing into the truck. The good stuff, the expensive stuff, the things we'd bought together when we still pretended to be happy. "Where exactly is somewhere else?" Beth's jaw tightened. "That's not your concern anymore." One of the movers approached us, consulting his clipboard. "Ma'am, we're just about finished here. You want us to grab anything from the garage?" "No, that's his stuff. We're done." His stuff. Like 20 years of marriage could be divided that cleanly. His stuff, her stuff, nobody's stuff. I watched them load the last boxes and tried to process what was happening. My wife was leaving me. My daughters were gone. My house was being stripped bare by strangers who probably did this every day. "There's someone else," Beth said suddenly, like she was ripping off a bandage. "I'm sorry, Jim, but there is. This isn't working anymore, and I found someone who makes me happy." The moving truck pulled away, leaving tire tracks in our perfect suburban driveway. I stood there holding divorce papers and watching my life disappear around the corner. "Who?" The question came out before I could stop it. For the first time that morning, Beth looked directly at me. There was something in her eyes. Guilt, maybe, or fear, or satisfaction. It was hard to tell. "Someone you know." She got into her car and drove away, leaving me alone in front of our house with half the furniture missing and 1,000 questions burning in my chest. I walked inside and sat down in my recliner, apparently the only piece of living room furniture that qualified as his stuff, and tried to make sense of the morning. Someone I knew. That narrowed it down to about half the city. Could be anyone from church, or one of the girls' teachers, or a neighbor, or... My phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. "She's at 1247 Oak Ridge Drive. Thought you should know. A friend." I stared at the address. Oak Ridge Drive was the fancy part of town, where the houses had circular driveways and 3-car garages. I knew exactly one person who lived on Oak Ridge Drive, my brother John. The drive across town took 15 minutes, but it felt like hours. I kept telling myself there had to be another explanation. Maybe Beth was staying with John's wife, Sandra. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe my anonymous friend had the wrong address. But Sandra's car wasn't in the driveway when I pulled up. Just Beth's Honda and John's new pickup truck, parked side by side like they belonged together. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at John's house. It was bigger than mine, newer, with professional landscaping and one of those fancy mailboxes that cost more than most people's monthly electric bill. John had always been the golden boy. Older, taller, better looking, more charming. Mom's favorite, Dad's pride and joy, the brother who could do no wrong. Apparently, he'd finally found something he was willing to do wrong. Through the big front window, I could see movement inside. Beth was there, laughing at something. My daughters were there too, sitting on John's leather couch like they belonged there. Like this was their home now, like I had never existed. I drove home in a fog, my mind spinning through 20 years of marriage, looking for signs I'd missed. Had Beth been unhappy? Of course she had. She complained about everything. Had she been distant? She'd been distant since our second anniversary. Had she been sneaking around? Actually, now that I thought about it, she'd been taking a lot of evening trips to help Sandra with the kids. Sandra, who was apparently never home when Beth was there helping. I pulled into my empty driveway and walked into my empty house. The silence was deafening. No TV, no music, no teenage girls arguing about bathroom time or homework or whose turn it was to load the dishwasher. Just me and the echo of my footsteps on hardwood floors. My phone rang. John's number. Jim, buddy, we need to talk. Buddy, like we were still friends, like he hadn't just blown up my entire life. I think we do, I said. Look, I know this is awkward, but... Awkward? I laughed, and it came out harsh and bitter. That's what you're calling this? Awkward? Jim, please, let me explain. Explain what, exactly? Explain how you've been screwing my wife? Explain how you convinced my daughters to abandon their father? Explain how my own brother decided to destroy my family? There was a long pause. When John spoke again, his voice was different, colder, more like the voice he used with difficult customers. It's not like that, Jim. Beth was unhappy. She needed someone who understood her. And you understood her? Better than you did, apparently. The line went ended. I stood there holding the phone, feeling something dark and electric building in my chest. 20 years ago, when Dad died and left us the business, John and I had made a promise. Partners, brothers, family first, always. Apparently, that promise had an expiration date. I walked into my home office and pulled out the partnership agreement we'd signed when we took over Parish Electric. 50-50 split, equal ownership, equal responsibility. But there were clauses in there, buried in the legal language, clauses about moral turpitude and conduct detrimental to the business, clauses that could void the partnership under certain circumstances. I'd helped write those clauses back when we were young and stupid and thought we'd be partners forever. Time to see how well they worked. Monday morning came like a slap in the face. I'd spent the weekend alone in my gutted house, living on pizza and rage, planning my next move. The partnership agreement was clear. Either partner could call for dissolution if the other engaged in conduct that damaged the business or violated the moral standards expected of company leadership. Adultery with a partner's spouse definitely qualified. I got to the office early, before John arrived, and called our lawyer. Then I called our accountant. Then I called Mary and Joanne, our 2 executive assistants, and asked them to clear their schedules for an important meeting. John strolled in at 9:30, coffee in hand, looking like a man without a care in the world. He'd always been casual about punctuality, one of the many things that had irritated me over the years, but that I'd let slide because he was family. Family. The word tasted like copper in my mouth. Morning, Jim. He settled into his office chair and fired up his computer. We should probably talk about... We should. I placed a copy of the partnership dissolution papers on his desk. I'm calling for immediate termination of our business relationship, effective today. John glanced at the papers, then looked up at me with that easy smile that had been charming people since we were kids. Come on, Jim. Don't you think you're being a little dramatic? Dramatic? I kept my voice level, professional. You're sleeping with my wife, John. You helped her steal my daughters and strip my house. Exactly how undramatic should I be about that? Look, I know you're upset. I'm not upset. I'm done. I pressed the intercom button on his desk phone. Mary, could you and Joanne come in here, please? They appeared in the doorway 30 seconds later, looking nervous. Mary had been with us for 12 years, Joanne for 8. They were good people, loyal employees, and they deserved to know what was happening to their company. Ladies, I said, I want you to witness this conversation. John, I'm formally notifying you that I'm dissolving our partnership under Section 7 of our agreement, which allows for immediate termination in cases of moral turpitude or conduct detrimental to the business." John's smile faltered. "Jim, you can't be serious." "Very serious. You've been having an affair with my wife for how long, John? Months? Years?" Mary gasped. Joanne's hand flew to her mouth. "That's a personal matter," John said, his voice tightening. "It has nothing to do with the business." "Everything you do reflects on this business. We're Parish Electric, John. Parish, as in the Parish family name that Dad built and we inherited. When you destroy my family, you damage our reputation and our brand." I turned to Mary and Joanne. "Did either of you know about this affair?" They shook their heads quickly, too quickly. "Really? Because Beth's been spending an awful lot of evenings helping Sandra with the kids. And John's been taking a lot of long lunch breaks lately. Nobody noticed anything?" Mary cleared her throat. "Well, there were rumors." "What kind of rumors?" "People saw them together, at restaurants, at the hardware store, places where Sandra usually goes with John." "And you didn't think to mention this to me?" Joanne spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "It wasn't our place, Mr. Parish. We thought maybe it was innocent." I nodded. They were right. It hadn't been their place. But it still stung. John stood up, his face flushing red. "This is ridiculous, Jim. You can't dissolve the partnership over personal issues. Watch me." I pulled out my phone and hit speed dial. "Dave, it's Jim Parish. I'm ready to move forward with the partnership dissolution we discussed this morning." Dave Brennan had been our lawyer for 10 years. He'd drawn up the original partnership agreement, and he knew every clause by heart. "Jim, wait." John's voice was strained now, the easy charm replaced by something sharper. "Let's talk about this like adults." "Adults?" I laughed, and it came out ugly. "Adults don't sleep with their brother's wife, John. Adults don't help destroy their brother's family. Adults don't look their business partner in the eye every day while they're stabbing him in the back. I never meant for it to happen this way." "How did you mean for it to happen? Were you planning to tell me eventually? Or were you just going to keep playing house with my wife and kids while pretending to be my partner?" John glanced at Mary and Joanne, who were watching this train wreck with horrified fascination. "Can we have some privacy here?" "No." I kept my voice steady, professional. "This is a business meeting, and they're employees. They have a right to know what's happening to their company." My phone buzzed. Dave Brennan calling back. "Jim?" Dave's voice came through the speaker. "I've reviewed the partnership agreement. You definitely have grounds for dissolution under Section 7. John has 30 days to respond, but given the circumstances, I'd recommend immediate separation of business operations." John sank back into his chair. "Jim, please, let's work this out." "Oh, we are working it out. You can buy me out, or I can buy you out, or we can liquidate everything and split the proceeds. Those are your options." "And if I refuse?" "Then we go to court, and I present evidence of your affair to a judge, along with testimony from employees who witnessed your conduct, records of your expense account lunches with my wife, and whatever else my private investigator turns up." John's face went pale. "You hired a private investigator." "This morning. Funny thing about adultery, John. It leaves a paper trail. Credit card receipts, hotel records, cell phone data. Amazing what people can find when they know where to look." That was a bluff. I hadn't hired anyone yet. But John didn't know that, and the look on his face told me I'd hit a nerve. Mary cleared her throat. Should we keep working normally? I mean, until this gets sorted out?" "For now, yes. John and I will be separating our operations immediately. I'll be taking the commercial contracts. John can have the residential side." "Like hell," John snapped. The commercial contracts are worth 3 times the residential business." "Then you should have thought about that before you decided to screw my wife." The words hung in the air like smoke. Mary and Joanne looked like they wanted to disappear. John looked like he wanted to hit me. "Fine," he said finally, "but I want the building, and the trucks, and half the equipment. We'll let the lawyers sort it out." I stood up and straightened my tie. "Ladies, I'll be working from the satellite office on Elm Street until further notice. If you need anything, call my cell." I walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back to John. "Oh, and John, give Beth my regards. Tell her I hope she's happy with her choices." I left him sitting there, surrounded by 20 years of partnership and family history that he'd just thrown away for a woman who'd already proven she was willing to betray the people who loved her. The satellite office was smaller, quieter, and came with the added benefit of not having to see my brother's face every day. I spent the rest of Monday making calls, moving accounts, and setting up new business relationships. By 5 o'clock, I'd secured 3 new commercial contracts and poached 2 of John's best residential customers. It felt good. It felt like progress. It felt like the beginning of something that was going to get very ugly, very fast. My phone rang as I was locking up the office. Unknown number. Mr. Parish, this is Detective Morrison with the City Police. We've had a complaint filed against you for harassment and threatening behavior. My blood went cold. What kind of complaint? Your brother says you threatened him in front of witnesses today, made some statements about hiring investigators and destroying his reputation. I dissolved our business partnership, Detective. That's not harassment, that's business. He also says you've been driving by his house, watching his family. His family? The words came out harsher than I intended. Detective, that's my wife and daughters he's talking about. My wife, who left me on Friday. My daughters, who I haven't seen since she took them. There was a pause. I see. Well, Mr. Parish, I'd recommend you avoid any contact with your brother or your estranged wife until this situation gets resolved through proper legal channels. And what about my daughters? When do I get to see them? That's a matter for family court, sir. Not something we can help you with. The line went ended. I stood there in the parking lot of my temporary office, watching the sun set over a city I'd helped wire and power for 20 years, and realized that my brother hadn't just stolen my wife. He'd stolen my children, my business, and now he was trying to make me look like the bad guy. That was his first mistake. His second mistake was thinking I was going to take it lying down. Tuesday morning brought rain and a phone call from my lawyer that made my coffee taste like battery acid. Jim, we've got problems, Dave said. Beth filed for emergency custody yesterday. She's claiming you're unstable and potentially dangerous to the children. I nearly dropped the phone. Dangerous? I'm their father, Dave. I've never laid a hand on those girls. She says you've been making threats against her and John, that you're obsessed with revenge, and that you've been stalking them. I drove by the house once, to see where my daughters were living. She also says you've been drinking heavily and making concerning statements about getting even. That one hit closer to home. I had been drinking, not heavily, but more than usual. And I had been talking about getting even, but not in front of the girls, never in front of the girls. What's the timeline here, Dave? Emergency hearing is Thursday morning. Judge Martinez is presiding. If Beth gets temporary custody, it becomes a lot harder to get it back. Judge Martinez. I knew that name. He'd been in the news lately for his tough stance on domestic violence and child protection. Exactly the kind of judge who'd err on the side of caution when it came to protecting kids from potentially unstable fathers. What do I need to do? Stay clean, stay calm, and stay away from Beth and John until the hearing. And Jim, find yourself a family law attorney. I do business law, not custody battles. I spent Tuesday morning calling family lawyers and getting the same response from all of them. Emergency custody cases were tough to fight, especially when the mother had witnesses to back up her claims about the father's threatening behavior. Witnesses like John and Mary and Joanne. By noon, I'd found a lawyer willing to take my case. Rebecca Santos, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who specialized in fathers' rights cases. Her office was downtown in one of those glass towers that made you feel small just walking into the lobby. Mr. Parish, she said, shaking my hand with a grip that could crack walnuts. I've reviewed your situation. I'm going to be honest with you. This is an uphill battle. How uphill? Your wife has documentation of your threatening behavior, witness testimony about your mental state, and she's already established a stable living situation for the children. Plus, she's claiming the affair was a response to emotional abuse from you. Emotional abuse? The words came out like a growl. I worked 60 hours a week to support that woman. I never raised my voice to her, never criticized her parenting, never even complained when she spent money like water on things we didn't need. What did you complain about? I thought about it. Nothing. I kept my mouth shut and tried to keep the peace. That might be part of the problem. Judges like to see fathers who are engaged, involved, emotionally present. If you've been distant or uninvolved, I wasn't distant. I was working. Someone had to pay for the house and the cars and the private schools and the vacations. Rebecca made notes on a legal pad. Tell me about your relationship with your daughters. They're everything to me. Bu's 15, she's smart and stubborn and wants to be an engineer. Bree's 13, she's artistic and sensitive and still likes to watch movies with her dad on Sunday nights. When's the last time you talked to them? Friday morning, before Beth took them. Have you tried to contact them since then? Beth won't let me. She says they need time to adjust to the new living situation. Rebecca leaned back in her chair. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to file a counter petition for joint custody, and I'm going to argue that Beth's affair and the disruption she's caused to the children's lives demonstrates poor judgment on her part. Will it work? Maybe, but Jim, I need you to understand something. If you do anything that could be construed as threatening or unstable between now and Thursday, you'll lose those girls, maybe permanently. I drove home through the rain, Rebecca's words echoing in my head. Stay calm, stay clean, stay away from Beth and John. Easier said than done. My empty house felt like a tomb. I walked through rooms that still smelled like my daughter's shampoo and my wife's perfume, past empty spaces where furniture used to be, and tried to figure out how my life had gotten so completely derailed. The doorbell rang at 6 o'clock. I opened it to find my sister Connie standing on the porch with a casserole dish and a grim expression. "You look like hell," she said, pushing past me into the house. "Thanks. That's exactly what I needed to hear today." Connie set the casserole on the kitchen counter and turned to face me. She was 2 years younger than me, but she'd always been the toughest of the Parish kids. Mom used to say Connie could stare down a tornado and make it change direction. "I heard about Beth and John," she said. "From who?" "Mom, who heard it from Mrs. Henderson at the grocery store, who heard it from her daughter-in-law, who works at the bank where Beth opened a new account." Small towns. Information traveled faster than electricity. So the whole city knows? Pretty much. And Jim, people are pissed. At them, not you. That was something, at least. What are people saying? That John's a snake and Beth's a fool, that you're better off without her, that those girls deserve better than a mother who'd break up their family for her husband's brother. Connie opened the casserole dish and started dishing out what looked like her famous tuna noodle surprise. "But there's something else you need to know." "What?" "This has been going on for a long time, Jim. Longer than you think." I sat down at the kitchen table, one of the few pieces of furniture Beth had left behind. "How long?" "At least 2 years. Maybe longer." Sandra knew. She's been covering for them, lying about where John was, making excuses for why Beth was always around. Sandra knew? John's wife had always seemed like a decent person. Quiet, maybe a little mousy, but decent. And she was okay with it? Hell no, she filed for divorce last month. That's why John needed a new place to live. The pieces started falling into place. John's sudden interest in a bigger house. Beth's increasing dissatisfaction with our marriage. The long evenings she spent helping Sandra with the kids, while Sandra was apparently planning to leave John. So Beth wasn't just leaving me for John, I said slowly. She was leaving me for John's house and John's money and John's lifestyle. Looks that way. I pushed the tuna noodles around on my plate, not really tasting them. Connie, I need to ask you something. Do you think I was a bad husband? She considered the question seriously. You were a distracted husband. You worked too much. You didn't pay enough attention to what was happening at home, and you let Beth walk all over you for years. But was I abusive? Emotionally abusive? Of course not. You're too much of a pushover to be abusive. That was part of the problem. Beth's claiming I was. She's trying to get full custody of the girls. Connie's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. She's what? I told her about the emergency custody hearing, about Beth's claims of threatening behavior and emotional abuse, about the witnesses who'd heard me dissolve the partnership with John. That's bullshit, Connie said when I finished, and I'll testify to that if you need me to. Thanks, but I'm not sure character witnesses are going to be enough. Then what are you going to do? I looked around my empty kitchen, thinking about my daughters living in John's house, sleeping in bedrooms I'd never seen, eating dinners I hadn't cooked, living a life that didn't include me. I'm going to fight, I said. However long it takes, whatever it costs, I'm going to fight. Connie smiled for the first time since she'd arrived. Good, because the Jim Parish I grew up with never backed down from a fight, even when he probably should have. After she left, I sat in my empty living room and made a list of everything I knew about Beth and John's affair. Dates, times, places where they'd been seen together, credit card records I could subpoena, phone records that might show a pattern of communication. If Beth wanted to play dirty, I could play dirty too. But first, I had to survive Thursday's custody hearing, and I had to figure out how to see my daughters again without looking like the unstable, threatening father Beth was painting me to be. The rain kept falling, drumming against the windows of my empty house like fingers tapping out a message I couldn't quite decode. Thursday morning arrived gray and cold, like the city was matching my mood. I put on my best suit, the navy one Beth had bought me for our 15th anniversary, and tried not to think about the irony of wearing her gift to fight her for custody of our children. The courthouse was downtown, a massive stone building that had been intimidating people since 1923. Rebecca Santos met me on the steps, looking professional and confident, in a way that made me feel slightly less like I was about to throw up. "Remember," she said as we walked toward the entrance, "stay calm, answer only what you're asked, and don't let them bait you into losing your temper." What if they lie? They probably will. We'll deal with it. The family court waiting area was full of people who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Divorced parents, social workers, lawyers with briefcases full of other people's misery. I spotted Beth immediately. She was sitting with John and a woman I didn't recognize, probably her attorney. Beth looked good. She'd gotten her hair done, was wearing a conservative dress I'd never seen before, and had that composed, suffering expression she used when she wanted people to feel sorry for her. John looked uncomfortable in a suit that was probably more expensive than my truck. They didn't look at me. "Mr. and Mrs. Parish," a bailiff called our names. "Judge Martinez will see you now." Judge Martinez was a small man with steel gray hair and eyes that looked like they'd seen every kind of human stupidity imaginable. His courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, more like a conference room than the grand chambers you see on TV. "This is an emergency custody hearing," he said without preamble. "Mrs. Parish is seeking temporary full custody of the minor children, Bew and Bree Parish. Mr. Parish is opposing this request. Mrs. Parish, you may present your case first." Beth's lawyer was a thin woman with sharp features and a voice like a scalpel. "Your Honor, Mrs. Parish removed the children from the family home due to legitimate concerns about Mr. Parish's mental state and potential for violence. She presented evidence, photos of the empty house, testimony from Mary and Joanne about my threatening behavior at the office, a statement from John about my obsessive and erratic conduct. Mr. Parish has been stalking my client and her companion," the lawyer continued. "He's made threats about hiring private investigators, destroying reputations, and getting revenge. He's been drinking heavily and making statements that suggest he's not mentally stable enough to care for minor children." Judge Martinez looked at me over his glasses. "Mr. Parish, how do you respond to these allegations?" Rebecca stood up. "Your Honor, Mr. Parish is a devoted father who's been blindsided by his wife's affair and her attempt to remove his children from his life. His actions have been those of a man trying to protect his business interests and maintain contact with his daughters, not those of someone who poses a threat to anyone." "What about the threatening behavior at his workplace?" "Mr. Parish discovered that his business partner, who is also his brother, was having an affair with his wife. He responded by legally dissolving their partnership, which is his right under their business agreement. There were no threats of violence, only statements about protecting his financial interests." The judge made notes. "Mrs. Parish, I'd like to hear from you directly. Why do you believe your husband poses a danger to your children?" Beth stood up, and I was struck by how small she looked, how fragile and vulnerable. She'd always been good at that. "Your Honor, Jim has been different lately. Angry, obsessive, talking about getting even with people who've wronged him. He's been drinking more, staying up late making lists of people he blames for our marriage problems. When I told him I was leaving, he became enraged. He threatened to destroy John's reputation and ruin his business." "Did he threaten physical violence?" "Not directly, but the way he looked at us, the things he said about making us pay, I was afraid. I'm still afraid." Judge Martinez turned to me. "Mr. Parish, do you have anything to say in response?" I stood up, my legs feeling unsteady. "Your Honor, I love my daughters more than anything in this world. I would never do anything to hurt them or put them in danger. Yes, I'm angry about my wife's affair. Yes, I dissolved my business partnership with my brother because of it, but I've never threatened violence against anyone, and I've never been anything but a loving father to those girls." "When did you last see your daughters?" "Friday morning, before my wife took them. I haven't been allowed to speak to them since then." "Have you attempted to contact them?" "I've asked to speak to them, but my wife says they need time to adjust." The judge made more notes. "I'm going to speak to the children privately. Bailiff, please bring them in." My heart jumped when Bew and Bree walked into the courtroom. They looked scared and confused, older somehow than they had just 6 days ago. Bew caught my eye and gave me a small, sad smile. Bree looked like she'd been crying. Judge Martinez spoke to them gently, asking about their living situation, their feelings about their parents, whether they felt safe. I couldn't hear their answers, but I could see their faces. They looked lost. After 10 minutes, he sent them back to the waiting area. "Based on the evidence presented," Judge Martinez said, "I'm going to grant temporary custody to Mrs. Parish, with supervised visitation rights for Mr. Parish." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Rebecca put her hand on my arm, keeping me from standing up. "However," the judge continued, "I want to make something clear. This is a temporary order, pending a full custody evaluation. Mrs. Parish, your husband has a right to see his children, and I expect you to facilitate that. Mr. Parish, you will have no contact with Mrs. Parish or Mr. John Parish outside of arrangements for visitation. Any violation of this order will result in the loss of visitation rights. Is that understood? We both nodded. The full custody hearing will be scheduled within 60 days. Court is adjourned. I walked out of that courthouse feeling like I'd been hit by a truck, supervised visitation, like I was a criminal who couldn't be trusted alone with my own daughters. Jim, Rebecca said as we stood on the courthouse steps, this isn't over. Temporary orders get overturned all the time. How often? Often enough. But we need to build a stronger case. Character witnesses, evidence of your involvement in the girls' lives, documentation of Beth's affair and how it's affected the children. And until then, you get to see your daughters 2 hours a week, with a court-appointed supervisor watching your every move. I drove home through streets I'd driven down thousands of times, past houses I'd wired, businesses I'd serviced, a city I'd helped build and power, but it all felt foreign now, like I was seeing it through someone else's eyes. My phone rang as I pulled into my driveway. Boo's number. Dad? Her voice was small, scared. Hey, baby, are you okay? No. Dad, I don't understand what's happening. Mom says you're sick, that you might hurt us, but that doesn't make sense. You've never hurt anyone. I'm not sick, Boo, and I would never, ever hurt you or your sister. You know that, right? I know. But, Dad, why did you and Uncle John have that big fight? Mom says you threatened him. I closed my eyes, trying to figure out how to explain adult betrayal to a 15-year-old girl. Uncle John and I had a disagreement about the business. Sometimes grown-ups say things they don't mean when they're angry. Are you and Mom getting divorced? Yes, sweetheart, we are. Because of Uncle John? Smart girl. Too smart for her own good. It's complicated, Boo. But I want you to know that none of this is your fault or Bree's fault. Sometimes marriages just don't work out. I want to come home, Dad. I want things to go back to the way they were. I want that too, baby. But right now, you need to stay with your mom and take care of your sister. Can you do that for me? I guess, Dad. Yeah? I love you. I love you too, Bew. More than you'll ever know. The line went ended. I sat in my car in my empty driveway and felt something break inside my chest. Not my heart. That had broken days ago. Something deeper. Something that had been holding me together since this whole nightmare started. I was going to get my daughters back. Whatever it took, however long it took, however dirty I had to fight. But first, I was going to make sure that John and Beth paid for what they'd done to my family. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still gray, heavy with the promise of storms to come. I walked into my empty house and started making plans. The Supervised Visitation Center was in a strip mall between a nail salon and a tax preparation office, the kind of place that existed only because families like mine had fallen apart. Saturday morning, 2 hours with my daughters, watched by a social worker named Mrs. Chen, who took notes on everything I said and did. Dad, this is weird, Bree whispered as we sat at a plastic table in a room decorated with faded Disney characters. I know, sweetheart, but it's temporary. Mom says you're getting help. Are you sick? I glanced at Mrs. Chen, who was pretending to read a magazine while obviously listening to every word. I'm not sick, Bree. Mom and I are having some problems, and the court wants to make sure everyone stays safe while we work things out. Safe from what? 15-year-old Bew answered before I could. Mom thinks Dad might hurt us because he's mad about the divorce. That's ridiculous, Bree said. Dad's never hurt anyone. I know that, and you know that, but the court doesn't know that yet, I said carefully. So we have to follow their rules for now. We played board games and talked about school and tried to pretend that having our family time monitored by a stranger was normal. When the 2 hours were up, Mrs. Chen walked them to the waiting area where Beth was sitting with a magazine and a martyred expression. Girls, say goodbye to your father, she said, not looking at me. Bew hugged me tight. This sucks, Dad. Language, Beth said automatically. It's okay, I told Bew. I'll see you next week. Bree's hug lasted longer. She was crying a little, trying not to let her mother see. I miss you, Daddy. I miss you too, baby, but I'm working on fixing this, okay? After they left, Mrs. Chen asked me to stay for a few minutes to discuss the visit. How do you think it went? She asked, pen poised over her notepad. Fine, normal, they're good kids. They seemed confused about the situation. They should be. Their mother left their father for their uncle and then told them their father might hurt them. Of course they're confused. Mrs. Chen made a note. Mr. Parish, I have to ask, have you been drinking? Not today. But you have been drinking more than usual since the separation? I thought about lying, but what was the point? Yes, some. Not around the girls, never around the girls. Are you getting any counseling or support? I'm talking to my lawyer and my family. That's support. More notes. The girls mentioned that you're working on fixing this. What did you mean by that? I meant I'm working with my attorney to get a fair custody arrangement. Nothing more sinister than that. After the meeting, I drove to my sister Connie's house for Sunday dinner. It was a tradition we'd maintained even after Dad died, the Parish family gathering every week to catch up and argue about politics and sports. Today, it felt like a war council. Mom was there, looking older than her 72 years. Connie had filled her in on the custody hearing, and she was furious in that quiet, dangerous way that had terrified us as children. That boy, she said, referring to John, has disgraced this family, and that woman has poisoned my granddaughters against their own father. Mom, the girls don't believe Beth's lies. They know I'd never hurt them. But they're living in that house, listening to her poison every day. How long before they start to doubt? It was a question that had been keeping me awake at night. Kids were resilient, but they were also impressionable. How long before Beth's version of events became their reality? I need to move faster on the custody case, I said. Build a stronger case. Find better evidence. Connie set down her coffee cup. What kind of evidence? Proof that Beth's affair has been going on longer than she admits. Documentation of her lies to the court. Character witnesses who can testify about what kind of father I really am. I can help with that, Mom said. I've got friends all over this city. People who've known you since you were born. And I've got something else, Connie said. Sandra Parish wants to talk to you. John's soon-to-be ex-wife. About what? About what she knows about the affair. About what she's willing to testify to in court. We met at a coffee shop on the other side of town, away from the usual Parish family haunts. Sandra looked tired, older than her 40 years, like someone who'd been carrying a heavy burden for too long. I'm sorry, Jim, she said before I could even sit down. I should have told you what was happening. I should have warned you. How long did you know? 2 years, maybe longer. John started staying out late, making excuses about work or the guys. Then I saw them together at the mall and the way they looked at each other. I knew. Why didn't you say anything? Sandra stirred her coffee, not meeting my eyes. Because I was hoping it would burn out. Because I didn't want to destroy two families. Because I was scared of what would happen if I did. What changed your mind? Beth came to see me last month. She said John was going to leave me anyway, and it would be easier for everyone if I just went along with it quietly. She offered me money, Jim. She offered to pay me to disappear so she could have my husband and my life without any complications. The coffee in my mouth turned bitter. She offered to buy you off? $50,000 and a promise that John would be generous in the divorce settlement. All I had to do was stay quiet about the affair and not cause any trouble. What did you tell her? I told her to go to hell. Then I called a lawyer and filed for divorce. Sandra reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope. These are copies of everything I have. Credit card statements showing John's expenses when he was supposed to be working late. Hotel receipts, restaurant bills, even receipts from a jewelry store where he bought her a necklace for their anniversary. Their anniversary? They celebrate the anniversary of their first encounter, October 15th, 2 years ago. John bought her a diamond necklace and had it engraved. I opened the envelope and looked through the documents. It was all there, a paper trail of betrayal going back 24 months. Proof that Beth had been lying to me, to the court, and to our daughters about how long the affair had been going on. Sandra, would you be willing to testify about this in court? Yes. And Jim? There's something else. Something about Beth's claims that you were abusive. What about them? She's been practicing, rehearsing her victim's story with John, working on her facial expressions and her tone of voice. I heard them one night, going over her testimony for the custody hearing. The coffee shop suddenly felt too warm, too crowded. She rehearsed it? Like she was preparing for a performance. John was coaching her on how to look scared, how to make her voice shake when she talked about feeling threatened. I sat back in my chair, processing this information. Beth hadn't just betrayed me, she'd planned it, calculated it, turned destroying my relationship with my daughters into a performance art. There's one more thing, Sandra said. Beth's been telling the girls that you don't really want them, that you're only fighting for custody to hurt her, not because you love them. That hit me like a physical blow. She said, what? I heard her on the phone with Bew. She said you were using them as weapons in the divorce, that if you really loved them, you'd let them stay where they were happy. I stood up so fast my chair nearly tipped over. Several people in the coffee shop turned to look at us. "Jim," Sandra said quietly, "sit down. Getting angry won't help those girls." She was right, but it took everything I had to settle back into my chair. How do I fight this? How do I prove to my daughters that their mother is lying? You don't fight her lies with more anger. You fight them with truth, and with patience, and with evidence. Sandra pushed the envelope toward me. This is a start. But Jim, you need to be smart about how you use it. If you come across as vindictive or vengeful, it'll backfire. What do you suggest? Let your lawyer handle the legal strategy. You focus on being the best father you can be during those supervised visits. Show Mrs. Chen and the court that you're stable, loving, and focused on what's best for the girls. And what about John and Beth? Do I just let them get away with destroying my family? Sandra smiled, and for the first time since I'd known her, it wasn't a pleasant expression. Oh, they won't get away with it. Trust me on that. Sometimes the best revenge is just letting people face the consequences of their own choices. I drove home with Sandra's evidence on the passenger seat and a plan forming in my mind. Beth wanted to play games? Fine. But she was about to learn that I'd been playing the long game a lot longer than she had, and unlike her, I didn't have to rehearse my performance. The truth was going to be enough. Monday morning brought news that changed everything. Rebecca Santos called while I was having my first cup of coffee in my empty kitchen. "Jim, we need to meet. Something's happened that could completely alter your custody case." An hour later, I was sitting in her office while she spread documents across her conference table like a dealer laying out cards. "Sandra Parish contacted me over the weekend," Rebecca said. "She's provided documentation that proves Beth's affair has been going on for over 2 years. But that's not the best part." "What's the best part?" "Beth lied under oath during the emergency custody hearing. She testified that the affair was recent, that it started after your marriage was already failing. These documents prove that's false." Rebecca pulled out a hotel receipt dated 18 months ago. "This is from the Marriott downtown. John Parish, room for 2, charged to his business credit card. The same night Beth told you she was at her book club. She showed me more evidence. Restaurant receipts, jewelry store purchases, even a vacation rental in Branson that John had paid for while Beth told me she was visiting her sister in Kansas City. This establishes a pattern of deception that goes far beyond the affair itself," Rebecca continued. "Beth has been systematically lying to you, to the court, and presumably to your daughters about the timeline and nature of her relationship with your brother. Can we use this to get the custody order reversed? Possibly. But Jim, I want to try something else first, something that might give us even more leverage." Rebecca pulled out her phone and showed me a text message. "This came from Beth's attorney this morning. She wants to negotiate." The message was brief. "Client willing to discuss settlement. Can we meet?" "Settlement?" I felt my blood pressure spike. "I don't want a settlement. I want my daughters back. Hear me out. If we go into negotiations with this evidence, we might be able to get Beth to agree to joint custody without having to go through a lengthy court battle. It would be faster, cheaper, and less traumatic for the girls. And if she refuses? Then we take her to court and destroy her credibility with the perjury evidence. But Jim, I think she's going to be more reasonable than you expect." The meeting was set for Wednesday afternoon at Rebecca's office. Beth arrived with her attorney and an expression that could have frozen hell. She looked like she'd rather be getting a root canal. "Mrs. Parish," Rebecca began, "my client is prepared to discuss a custody arrangement that serves the best interests of the children." "Mr. Parish has already demonstrated that he's unstable and potentially dangerous," Beth's lawyer replied. "We're not interested in joint custody." Rebecca smiled and opened a file folder. "Before we continue, I'd like to clarify some statements your client made during the emergency custody hearing." She placed the hotel receipt on the table. "Mrs. Parish, you testified that your relationship with John Parish began recently, after your marriage to my client had already deteriorated. Can you explain this hotel receipt from 18 months ago?" Beth's face went pale. Her lawyer picked up the receipt and examined it. "This doesn't prove anything," the lawyer said, but her voice had lost some of its confidence. Rebecca placed more documents on the table. Restaurant receipts, jewelry purchases, vacation rentals, all paid for by John Parish, all during times when Mrs. Parish told my client she was elsewhere. We have 2 years of documentation, including testimony from Sandra Parish about the affair. "Sandra's bitter about her divorce," Beth said. "She'll say anything to hurt John." "Sandra Parish has no reason to lie, Mrs. Parish, but you apparently do." Rebecca leaned forward. "Perjury is a felony. The court takes a very dim view of people who lie under oath, especially in custody cases involving children." Beth's lawyer whispered something in her ear. Beth shook her head violently. What are you proposing? The lawyer asked. Joint physical custody, alternating weeks. Mr. Parish keeps the family home. Mrs. Parish can live wherever she chooses. Child support calculated according to state guidelines. And Mrs. Parish stops making false claims about Mr. Parish's mental state or potential for violence. That's unacceptable, Beth snapped. Those girls need stability, not to be shuffled back and forth between houses. The stability you provided when you moved them in with your lover? Rebecca's voice was ice cold. The stability you provided when you stripped their home of furniture and told them their father might hurt them? Beth's lawyer held up a hand. We need to discuss this privately. They stepped into the hallway for 10 minutes. When they came back, Beth looked like she'd been crying. We'll agree to joint custody, the lawyer said, but Mrs. Parish wants alternating weekends, not alternating weeks. Weekends aren't enough, I said, speaking for the first time since the meeting started. I want half time with my daughters. Mr. Parish, Beth said, her voice shaking, please be reasonable. The girls are settled at John's house. They have their own rooms. Their friends are nearby. Their friends are 10 minutes away from our house too, Beth. The house where they grew up, where their memories are, where they belong. That house is too big for just you and the girls. It's their home, Rebecca intervened. Here's our final offer. Joint physical custody, alternating weeks. Mr. Parish keeps the family home. No child support. Both parents cover expenses during their custody time. And Mrs. Parish publicly retracts her statements about Mr. Parish being unstable or dangerous. Publicly? A statement to the court? And a letter to the visitation supervisor explaining that the supervised visits are no longer necessary. Beth's lawyer shook her head. We can't agree to that. Then we'll see you in court, Rebecca said, with all of this evidence. And Mrs. Parish, I should mention that we'll also be filing a motion for sanctions based on your perjured testimony. The room was quiet for a long moment. Finally, Beth spoke. What kind of public retraction? A simple statement acknowledging that you may have overstated your concerns about Mr. Parish's behavior and that you believe joint custody is in the children's best interests. Another whispered conference, another long pause. We'll agree to alternating weeks, Beth's lawyer said finally, but we want the right to modify the arrangement if it's not working for the children. Both parties have that right, Rebecca said, but any modifications have to be agreed upon by both parents or ordered by the court. We spent another hour working out the details. School schedules, holidays, transportation arrangements, all the logistics of a divided family. It was exhausting and heartbreaking and necessary. When it was over, I walked out of that office with joint custody of my daughters and the knowledge that I'd won something important. Not everything. I still had to share them with a woman who'd betrayed me and a brother who'd helped her do it, but I'd won the right to be their father again. The supervised visits ended immediately. That Saturday, instead of meeting at the strip mall center, I picked up Bew and Bree at John's house and brought them home. Dad, you got our furniture back, Bree exclaimed as she ran through the house, checking every room. Some of it. We'll get the rest eventually. Bew was quieter, more thoughtful. Mom said you threatened to hurt her and Uncle John. She said that's why we couldn't live with you. I sat down on the couch, the same couch where we'd watched movies together for years, and tried to figure out how to explain adult betrayal to a 15-year-old. Boo, when people do things that hurt us badly, sometimes we say things we don't mean. I was angry at your mom and your uncle, and I said some things I shouldn't have said, but I never threatened to hurt anyone, and I would never do anything to put you or your sister in danger. So why did Mom say you did? Because she was scared, and when people are scared, they sometimes exaggerate or misremember things. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was enough truth for a 15-year-old to understand. Are you still angry at them? Bree asked. I thought about it. Was I still angry? Yes, but it was a different kind of anger now. Colder, more focused, more patient. I'm disappointed in them, I said finally, but I'm not going to let that anger hurt you girls. You're the most important thing in my life. That night, after the girls were in bed, I sat in my living room and made a list. Not a list of people to blame or ways to get revenge, but a list of things I needed to do to rebuild my life and my relationship with my daughters. Get the house fully furnished again. Help the girls adjust to the new custody schedule. Focus on being the best father I could be. And somewhere down the line, when the time was right, make sure that John and Beth faced the full consequences of what they'd done to my family. But that could wait. I had my daughters back, and that was what mattered most. The rest would take care of itself. Epilogue. 6 months later, I was rewiring the electrical system in a new office building downtown when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Thought you should know. John's business is in trouble. Major client pulled out after hearing about the affair. Sandra's divorce settlement is bleeding him dry. Karma's A. A friend. I smiled and put the phone back in my pocket. The same anonymous friend who'd given me John's address that first day had been sending me updates ever since. John's reputation in the business community had taken a serious hit when word got out about the affair. Clients didn't like working with contractors who couldn't be trusted to honor their commitments, even personal ones. Beth was working as a receptionist at a dental office, a significant step down from the lifestyle she'd been accustomed to as my wife. John's house, the one she'd been so eager to move into, was in foreclosure. They'd moved into a small apartment across town, and the girls complained that it was cramped and noisy. "Dad," Bo had said during one of our weeks together, "I don't understand why Mom left our house for that tiny place." "People make choices, sweetheart. Sometimes they don't work out the way they expected." The girls had adjusted to the custody arrangement better than I'd hoped. They missed having both parents in the same house, but they'd adapted to having two homes, two sets of rules, two different versions of normal. And slowly, gradually, they were beginning to see their mother's choices more clearly. "Mom's always mad now," Bree had confided in me. "She yells at Uncle John all the time, and he yells back. It's not like it used to be when we all lived together." I didn't say anything, but I filed that information away. The fantasy life Beth had imagined with John was turning out to be messier and more complicated than she'd expected. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Rebecca Santos. "Jim, I just got a call from Beth's attorney. She wants to modify the custody arrangement. Apparently she's having some financial difficulties and thinks it would be better for the girls to spend more time with you." I leaned against the wall and watched electricians running wire through the building I was helping to power. Everything connected, eventually. Every circuit completed itself, one way or another. "What kind of modification?" I asked. "She's proposing that the girls live with you full-time during the school year and spend summers with her. She says it's about stability and school districts, but I suspect it's more about child support." If the girls lived with me most of the time, Beth would be the one paying support instead of receiving it. Financial difficulties had a way of clarifying people's priorities. "What do you think?" "I think your daughters are old enough to have input on where they want to live. Why don't you talk to them and see what they want?" That evening, I made the girls' favorite dinner, spaghetti and meatballs with garlic bread, and we sat around our kitchen table like a real family again. "Girls, I need to talk to you about something. Your mom has asked if you'd like to live here full-time during the school year and just visit her during summers and some weekends." Bew and Bree exchanged a look that said more than words could. "What do you want to do?" Bree asked. "I want whatever makes you happiest. This is your choice." "Can we think about it?" Bew asked. "Of course. Take all the time you need." But I could see the answer in their faces. They were tired of being shuttled back and forth, tired of living in a cramped apartment with two adults who fought constantly, tired of being caught in the middle of their mother's bad choices. 3 days later, Bew called me from Beth's apartment. "Dad, we want to come home, for good." "Are you sure?" "We're sure. We told Mom and she's really upset, but Dad, we just want to come home." I picked them up that afternoon. Beth met me at the door with red eyes and a suitcase full of their belongings. "This is what you wanted, isn't it?" she said, to turn my own daughters against me. "Beth, I never said a word against you to those girls, not once. You didn't have to. You just had to be the stable one, the reliable one, the one with the nice house and the steady job. I had to be their father." She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. Regret, maybe, or recognition of what she'd given up. "I hope you're happy, Jim." "I'm not happy, Beth, but I'm at peace. There's a difference." She got into John's truck, dented now, showing its age, and drove away. I watched until they turned the corner, then went inside to help my daughters unpack their things in the bedrooms where they belonged. That night, as I was turning off the lights and checking the doors, Boo came downstairs in her pajamas. "Dad, are you going to be okay? Taking care of us by yourself, I mean?" I pulled her into a hug, this daughter who was almost grown, who'd had to grow up too fast because of adult choices she'd had no part in making. "Sweetheart, taking care of you and your sister isn't a burden. It's the best job I've ever had." "Even better than being an electrician?" I laughed. "Even better than that." 6 months after that, I got another text from my anonymous friend. "John's filed for bankruptcy. Beth moved back in with her parents. Thought you'd want to know." I deleted the message without responding. I had better things to think about than my ex-wife's failures or my brother's financial troubles. Bew had been accepted to engineering school with a partial scholarship. Bree had discovered a talent for photography and was already talking about art school. My business was thriving. It turned out that being known as a man who stood up for his family was good for my reputation, not bad for it. I was coaching Bree's softball team and helping Beau with her calculus homework and learning to cook meals that didn't come from a box. I was being a father, a real father, for the first time in years. And every night, when I turned off the lights in my house, our house, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Complete. The circuit was closed, the power was flowing. Everything was exactly as it should be. Justice, it turned out, wasn't about revenge or punishment or making people pay for their mistakes. Justice was about restoration, about putting things back the way they were supposed to be, about protecting the people who mattered most and letting the rest take care of itself. I had my daughters, I had my integrity. I had a future that belonged to us, not to the people who tried to destroy what we'd built together, and that was more than enough.